Blackhawks remain winless on their road trip after falling last night in Seattle. I'll get into the key takeaways, and we'll also break down Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar's chances of cracking an Olympics roster.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman, also Blackhawks beat writer for Chicago Hockey Now. Have to let you all know off the jump that today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Go and download the Game Time app now, create an account, and then use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. All right, Blackhawks fans, tough 3-1 loss for the Blackhawks last night out in Seattle. Their offense had a sleepy performance despite heavily outpossessing the Kraken and also outshooting them. The Hawks led 65-45 in shot attempts in this game. Also had a 30-24 edge in shots on goal and 36-22 advantage in scoring chances in all situations. But they only managed to beat Kraken goaltender Joey Daccord once as he just continues to get the better of them and simply has their number. He now moves to 5-1-0 in 6 career starts against the Blackhawks with last night's win. He stopped 29 of the 30 shots that he faced and now also has a .937 career save percentage against the Blackhawks. So for whatever reason, Daccord always seems to have his A game whenever facing Chicago, especially at Climate Pledge Arena. The Kraken defenders also, I thought, did him a lot of favors and played a huge part in their team coming away with 2 points last night. So they blocked 19 shots on the night and did a really sound job of preventing some of the Blackhawks' best looks, especially when they were on the man advantage of getting all the way through to the net. And then I also thought the Blackhawks at points in time during this game were kind of lousy in terms of their execution and getting the finished product. They fired the puck wide of the net a handful of times when they generated a quality scoring chance and just overall weren't as crisp or as efficient as they needed to be in the offensive zone to pick up their first win of the road trip. The Hawks, as I mentioned on yesterday's preview episode, at the conclusion of this contest, they now have hit the halfway point of their trip and they still remain winless. They move now to 0-2-1 during their first 3 games, and they've also lost 4 of their last 5 overall to fall to 5-5-3 through 13 games on the season. This one was definitely a little bit frustrating because the Blackhawks did some good things. They definitely outpossessed the Kraken in the offensive zone, led in a lot of the major categories and the analytics. But the Kraken were the ones who just capitalized on a couple of their chances and a couple of key things I thought really did cost the Blackhawks in this game. First and foremost, the special teams. When you're in a close contested matchup and the defense is really coming to the forefront for both of these teams, you got to be better in the special teams department. And the Blackhawks lost both of those battles. First, they went 0-for-3 on their own man advantage. I mentioned the Kraken defenders did a really good job of blocking some of their shots, but I also thought the Hawks kind of had some turnovers of their own. They shot themselves in the foot a little bit with their puck movement in the offensive zone on the power play, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in segment 2, but not good enough on the man advantage last night, particularly against a bottom 5 penalty kill in the NHL that was under 70% on the season thus far. Blackhawks weren't able to capitalize and find the back of the net on their 3 opportunities. And then on the flip side, shorthanded, the Blackhawks surrendered a power play goal for the 3rd consecutive game as their PK just continues to fall to right around the middle of the pack now in the entire league after being top 6, top 7 in the NHL through the opening 7 to 8 contests. And they were the team going into this one, like I mentioned in my preview episode, that had the advantage in the special teams department, both on the penalty kill and the power play. They were also the better team at the faceoff dot. So I thought it was going to be a good opportunity for the Blackhawks to get their first win of the road trip, but unfortunately didn't do themselves any favors in the special teams department. Also, I thought they let the momentum slip out of their grasp once again in the second period. They closed out the opening 20 minutes with a really strong push, but weren't able to carry that over into the second. In this middle frame, just continues to give the Blackhawks fits. They fell behind 2-0 in the second, which proved to be very tough to come back from against a defensively sound Seattle Kraken bunch. And now over their last 8 games, the Blackhawks have been outscored 15-3 in the second period alone. They haven't won the goal-scoring battle in the second period since all the way back to the beatdown over the Blues. And they have actually, over their last 8 games, only been level in the second period with the opposing team just one single time, and that came, I believe, October 19th. I'm not 100% positive on the date, but I did know it came against the Anaheim Ducks. They've been outscored in the second period by each of their other opponents ever since. The Tampa Bay Lightning, the Los Angeles Kings, even the Ottawa Senators and the Hawks 7-3 win that night when Connor Bedard recorded his first career hat trick. Also against the Winnipeg Jets, the Edmonton Oilers, and now last night in Seattle, which wound up being the difference in this low-scoring affair, right? So the Blackhawks, I don't know what it is about the first intermission in these second periods, but they just have been throttled in that period for the majority of the season now, especially the last 2.5 weeks here. And that's something they definitely have to clean up and have to find a way to fix because it's costing them big time in games right now. And then last but certainly not least, there was no depth scoring from the Blackhawks last night. And overall, offensively, ever since that 7-goal output against the Senators, the Blackhawks have now been limited to just 6 goals total over their past 3 games. And it's mostly been from Connor Bedard and Andre Burakovsky, who converted on the lone goal of the game last night for the Blackhawks. What a play it was, by the way, from Connor Bedard to make it all happen. Recognizing that the Kraken blue liner is a little pressed up in coverage going through the neutral zone, he chips it by him and wins a foot race as the other Seattle Kraken defender collapses on him to try to get to that loose puck first. Bedard wins that race and finds Andre Burakovsky, the former Kraken, in his first game back in Seattle since they traded him to Chicago over the summer, finds the back of the net to not only extend his point streak to 4 games, but he's also now found the back of the net in 3 games in a row, giving him 10 points on the season through his opening 12 games with the Blackhawks. He and Bedard, as I've been talking about on the show a lot here, following these last 3 to 4 games, have really started to get it going and have started to click and establish that chemistry with one another. This was a great example of it. Bedard winning that foot race, Burakovsky crashing the front of the net, which he should be doing on a pretty frequent basis when he's playing with a skill player like Connor Bedard. I thought those two, along with Ryan Green, were the most effective trio for the Blackhawks once again. And I've talked about Bedard raising his baseline and that consistency that we've seen from him. Love to hear head coach Jeff Blashill kind of say the same thing after this game. He said not nearly enough of the Blackhawks players were on their A game last night, but Connor Bedard was. And honestly, he said he couldn't think of a game so far this year in which Bedard wasn't on his A game. That goes to show just the baseline has been risen for Bedard. And with the expectations rising in his 3rd season, he's absolutely matched that with his performances night in and night out. He also extended his point streak to 5 games in this one, now has a team leading 15 points for the Blackhawks. Is it 15 points? 16 points for the Blackhawks now, excuse me, through his opening 13 contests. Love to see Bedard and Burakovsky keep their red-hot streak going here, but that was all the offense that the Blackhawks were able to muster up. Frankie Nazar, I didn't think had one of his better performances. He's now been held off the stat sheet in 3 consecutive games. Ryan Donato now has gone pointless in 4 of his last 5. The Blackhawks aren't getting a lot of depth scoring right now or a lot of offensive help outside of the Connor Bedard line. That made an impact in their lack of an offensive output last night and why they were only managed to beat Joey Daccord 1 single time, despite heavily outpossessing the Kraken, despite getting more shots on goal and more scoring chances than they did. The Blackhawks weren't able to beat him cleanly and were also unable to tuck home one of those greasy and dirty goals, which the Kraken managed to get to open up the scoring from Jamie Alexiak, a harmless-looking wrister from out near the blue line that managed to squeak its way through traffic. The Hawks haven't been able to get enough offensive support also from their defensemen so far this year. I love Louis Crevier, and he's been incredible as a former 7th-round pick, but for all the skill there is on the Blackhawks blue line offensively, I think it's pretty unacceptable for him to be their leading goal scorer among all the defensemen with only 2 goals so far this year. Sam Rinzel only has 1 goal. Wyatt Kaiser hasn't found the back of the net. Same with Artem Levshinov, who I'll get to more here on in just a couple of minutes, Blackhawks fans. Alex Vlasic only has 1 goal. So the depth scoring defenseman in the bottom 6 for the Blackhawks, even the second line for Chicago, has failed to record a goal at even strength in 3 consecutive games. All of these things played a factor in the Blackhawks falling for the 3rd consecutive contest to start off their road trip and for the 4th time overall in their last 5 games. There's my quick reaction to the Blackhawks. 3-1 sleepy offensive output in their loss to the Seattle Kraken last night. Coming up in just a moment, I'll get into Oliver Moore's season debut and whether it's time to give Artem Levshinov the keys on the top power play unit. But first, I need to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors, which is Monarch. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. But that's why there is Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that helps bring your entire financial life together in one clean, super easy-to-use interface that's both available on your phone and on your laptop. And Monarch does all of the heavy lifting for you so that you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks any longer. Go and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarch.com, and you'll also get half off on your first year. Again, that's 50% off on your first year at monarch.com when you use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Real quick, before I get into segment 2, just a reminder to please go and smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Segment 2, getting into some other thoughts and takeaways that I had from last night's game, starting with Artem Levshinov, who I forgot to get rid of the Monarch tag. I apologize, Blackhawks fans. Starting with Artem Levshinov, who I thought had another real strong performance last night and just seems to keep getting better and better with each passing game and building off of his previous performance. He did have his 3-game point streak come to an end last night, but I thought he was probably the Blackhawks' best defenseman once again, especially in the offensive zone. And that's a conversation Arty has been in now in like each of the last 2 or 3 games here. He just continues to improve and get better and better. And as a result, he received a season high of ice time last night, nearly totaling 20 minutes. So looked like head coach Jeff Blashill also recognized that Arty was on top of his game once again. And it wasn't like a completely flawless performance from Arty defensively. He did have a couple of poor decisions and also committed 3 giveaways in the contest. But what I was really impressed with is his ability to go and recover when he does make those mistakes. And that's something that's been prevalent in his game so far in his young career, especially when he was making mistakes a little bit more frequently. And I do feel like I've talked about this on the show a handful of times. He's done better at putting himself in those positions less and less over, these last couple of weeks here. Kind of found himself in some difficult situations last night because of his decision-making, but his recoveries were incredible to go and prevent real quality opportunities from getting off on his goaltender in the other direction. One of them was when he made a poor decision to pinch in the neutral zone on a rush for the Kraken. That led to a potential breakaway for one of the Kraken forwards, but Arty was able to go and chase him down and limit him to just getting like a pretty harmless backhand shot off on Arvid Soderblom. I just feel like his puck movement in the offensive zone is at a different level right now than it's been throughout his opening 25 NHL contests, and is just gaining more and more confidence in knowing where to go and where to be in the offensive zone to be effective. Also had a super slick maneuver at the blue line to go and give himself some time and space, which he then fed Nick Foligno at the right dot for a high-quality scoring chance. Those simple plays and his recognition as well in the O-zone, I think, continues to get better. And I feel like he's starting to come into his own right in front of our own eyes, which has been a whole heck of a lot of fun to watch. While on the flip side, last night was another pretty forgettable performance for Sam Rinzel. He's really struggling right now, especially on the power play, and a huge part in the Blackhawks coming up 0 for 3 on their man advantage last night was two separate times on two of their three power play opportunities. After they got set up in the offensive zone and had established the cycle, Rinzel made horrible giveaways that allowed the Kraken's poor penalty kill to go and get a clear, and getting set up in transition off of the rush has been so difficult for the Blackhawks on that top unit in particular. So for Rinzel to go and commit those turnovers after they did the good work to go and get set up was very, very frustrating. And it feels like these turnovers, these giveaways, these poor decisions are happening on plays that Rinzel is definitely capable of making. It feels like he's overthinking out there right now, and the puck is just kind of finding him in some tough spots. He's battling the puck at this point in time. And I just wonder, with Artem Levshunov steadily making improvements, and as I talked about, just getting better and better and better, and I think being the Blackhawks' best defenseman overall in these last 2, 3, 4 games, I do wonder if Blashill considers giving Levshunov an opportunity with this top power play unit, because he's moved the puck well, quarterbacking the second unit in these last couple of contests as well. And even though I don't think either he or Rinzel have been overall effective enough on the man advantage for their offensive abilities, Levshunov, I feel like, is the one who's capable of quarterbacking the power play better at this point in time, which is pretty gosh darn impressive considering he's nearly 2 years younger than Sam Rinzel. While neither of them have a ton of pro experience, Arty actually has the advantage in that department. I still think for a kid who just turned 20 years old, for the improvements that he's making on the fly and how he's improving with each passing game seemingly, I just feel like it's time to give him that opportunity when Rinzel really isn't contributing on that top unit. And the Blackhawks just need more from that top man advantage. They're 21st in the NHL now on the power play. They've gotten some good goals together, but they continue to really struggle in terms of getting contributions from their defensemen, both in terms of shots on goal and also playmaking and moving the puck around in the offensive zone. I just think Arty, with the way he's playing right now, is probably the better of the two in that category. So I kind of expect to see Jeff Blashill go that department in one of these next couple of games. He obviously recognized that Levshunov was playing well once again last night by giving him nearly 20 minutes of ice time, and I'm sure had to recognize that Sam Rinzel's struggles unfortunately continue. Also got to mention how Oliver Moore looked in his season debut with the Blackhawks, was called up by Chicago earlier in the afternoon, but was not in the lineup for the Rockford IceHogs in their game on Sunday night, so he obviously knew that this transaction and call-up was coming. He was able to make the trip to Seattle and did play in his first NHL game of the season with the Blackhawks last night against the Kraken. And boy, what a blazing fast start it was for Moore in the opening 20 minutes, as he was all over the place in that first period, buzzing around and making plays happen. Truly might have been the Blackhawks' most dangerous forward in terms of scoring chances in that first frame. And after 20 minutes, he led the team with 4 shot attempts, also had 2 individual scoring chances, led the Blackhawks as well in individual expected goals for. And I loved in particular how Oliver Moore crashed the net with a purpose. That's something that if he continues to do, he's going to get rewarded. And he nearly was able to get his first NHL goal of the season because of that, as he had some quality looks from out in tight. I love for the style of play that Moore brings to the table. The hard-nosed play also translates over to going to the dirty areas when his team has the puck as well. We've seen, the uptick in his goal scoring from the incredible shots that he's had and the beautiful releases that led to him finding the back of the net with the IceHogs. Well, a couple of his goals that he scored this year as well was also from him crashing the crease. And that's something that's going to help his cause and help that goal scoring translate at the next level if he's able to continue to do that effectively. I was really impressed with how Moore wasn't trying to make the fancy plays right out of the gate in his season debut. He just put his head down, used his speed and the decent size that he has as well at 6 foot and being a pretty well-built forward for being only 20 years old, put his head down, went to the dirty areas, and nearly got rewarded because of it. If he continues to do that, good things are going to happen for Oliver Moore. I really love that mentality in his season debut. Didn't really make much of an impact for the Blackhawks over the final 40 minutes of this contest and ended up finishing with a -2 rating, 3 shots on goal, 1 hit and 1 block shot in just over 16 minutes of ice time. Did skate on the third line with Ryan Donato and Ilya Mikheyev, by the way, which during my preview episode yesterday, that's where I expected more to be in the lineup. And I do think that's a really good spot for him because with the wheels that he and Ilya Mikheyev have, they have the ability to go and cause havoc on the defensive side of things. And that's really where I think Oliver Moore is going to make his bread and butter. Because of his added offense, he might have a higher offensive ceiling than I initially projected, but I do still feel like his two-way play is what's going to be his living. That's what he's going to be known for. And on a checking line with Ryan Donato, who's also a defensively sound forward of his own, and with Ilya Mikheyev, those two can absolutely go and fly around the ice. So I think that's a really good spot for Oliver Moore. And if he plays like he did last night, better things are to come for both he and the Blackhawks. They definitely could use his impact down in the bottom 6 right now. And then last but certainly not least, not from the game itself last night, but another roster move that the Blackhawks made after recalling Oliver Moore and after placing Jason Dickinson on injured reserve, they also assigned Landon Slaggert to the Rockford IceHogs yesterday. And I've mentioned here on the show recently a couple of times, including on yesterday's show, that Slaggert, with Oliver Moore coming up, now finds himself in a somewhat precarious position. And I said it wasn't going to get any easier for him to draw back into the lineup consistently if/when the Blackhawks ever do get fully healthy. And, Jason Dickinson returns to truly give them 13 healthy forwards on the active roster. Well, instead of having 13 healthy forwards on the active roster, the Blackhawks ultimately decided to send Slaggert down to the AHL as he's still only 23 years old and in his second full season of professional hockey. So they clearly would rather have him playing in a more meaningful role on a consistent basis with the IceHogs, as opposed to being healthy scratch pretty regularly up in the NHL by Chicago. But yeah, definitely a tough development here for Slaggert. And with him not exactly having the highest ceiling and just more and more of these Kyle Davidson draft picks jumping onto the professional scene, Slaggert has a good size and speed combination and I think has a chance to be an effective fourth liner, but he's still not, the priority among the forward prospects. And if you want to be playing him on a regular basis, who's coming out of the NHL lineup? It's not going to be Colton Dach, at least on a consistent basis. I think he's pretty clearly ahead of Slaggert in the pecking order. We know it's not going to be the captain, Nick Foligno. He's going to be playing on a regular basis. Ryan Green has deserved to be in the lineup and I think is also ahead of Slaggert in the pecking order. Then obviously Oliver Moore, who also, plays on the penalty kill, plays with a lot of pace, obviously has the higher offensive upside between he and Slaggert. So it puts Landon in a little bit of a tough position, and it's not going to be any easier for him to A, get consistent NHL ice time, and also B, really prove to this front office and coaching staff that he's a legitimate puzzle piece, because there's going to be more and more of these kids stepping on the scene as, the years go by. And I'm not completely ruling it out for Slaggert that he is going to be a puzzle piece here, but I've talked on the show about how utilizing him as kind of an extra forward might not be the worst thing in the world, because that might be the spot that he winds up playing in one day down the road when the Blackhawks have more and more of these prospects on the scene. Clearly, though, the Blackhawks, instead of him being in that spot, even though it only leaves them with 12 healthy forwards now on their active roster, including Oliver Moore, they just clearly would prefer Slaggert to be playing on a consistent basis down in the AHL. But he's going to have a pretty good stint down there in order to, I think, kind of win over this coaching staff and, again, get called back up to get those consistent NHL minutes. And it's just going to be a tough battle for Landon Slaggert to go and do that. But he's also had a real tough start to his own season as he suffered a couple of different injuries during the preseason, also was dealing with an illness, has kind of been behind the 8 ball and playing catch up here in the 25-26 campaign so far, only has played in 5 games, yet to register a point. Hopefully he can kind of have a reset down in Rockford and really find his footing once again. And he's going to have to if he wants to get called back up by the Blackhawks this season, especially with Oliver Moore's capabilities. And maybe Jason Dickinson returning hopefully sooner rather than later. But there is everything I have from last night in Seattle. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans. Before I close out today's show, still want to get into Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar's chances of cracking an Olympics roster. But first, I got to show some love to another one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is now past the midway point, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for every kickoff still with a can't-miss offer. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and now more ways than ever to get in on the action, are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app now or visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com or the FanDuel Sportsbook app to place your first $5 bet and get $300 in bonus bets when it wins. I also got to talk to you all real quick about Game Time. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is go and cheer on your team. But that's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. So go and take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and then use our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDON NHL in all caps to get $20 off with Game Time. Segment 3, before I close out today's show, as we are now into the month of November, that means we're officially a month closer to the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan, which of course will feature NHL players once again. Although there has been some, tough developments from the Olympic side of things in terms of the hockey tournament over the last month or two involving the arena and untested ice, and not only the ice not being tested, but the entire venue, like the concessions, the restrooms, and all that stuff because of some delays in construction that's going on over in Italy. Hasn't been an ideal lead up to these Winter Olympics, and there's definitely some concern about, the health of NHL players, the health of everyone in attendance. Hopefully things can kind of be smoothed out over the final, 2.5 months now until that tournament officially kicks off. But because obviously of all the eyeballs and everything that transpired at the Four Nations face-off last winter, best on best once again, I think a lot of people are jazzed up for NHLers being back in the Winter Olympics. And with the Olympics being on the horizon, I wanted to be sure to bring up the latest on Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar's chances of cracking Team Canada and Team USA, which I actually broke down in late August. And I mentioned in that show, it's not going to be very easy for either of these two players to do, just considering the depth of both of these squads. I also don't know truly how many changes are going to be made to those rosters, with Canada winning the Four Nations face-off and the Americans having a pretty solid tournament, but unfortunately falling short in the gold medal game. But we do know that both of these two players are off to really good starts to their respective seasons, which definitely doesn't hurt their case, right? Bedard has elevated his game to another level so far in his third NHL campaign, leading scorer for the Blackhawks, tied for the team lead in points, 16 points now through his opening 13 contests. And even while Frank Nazar hasn't wound up on the stat sheet for 3 games in a row here, still been a very effective first full NHL campaign for him at only 21 years of age. Has 11 points, I believe, in his first 13 games now. But I do believe it's going to be difficult still for either of these two players to wind up cracking these rosters. And Frank Saravalli joined the CHSN broadcast last Tuesday during one of the intermissions when the Blackhawks were taking on the Ottawa Senators. And he kind of said the same thing. He mentioned that both of these players remain long shots Bedard for Team Canada and Nazar for Team USA to wind up on their Olympic rosters, although he did point out that Nazar has a better chance to play for Team USA than Bedard probably does for Team Canada. And I don't really think that should be all that surprising. That was actually a statement I said back on the show when projecting these rosters way back in August. And it's only because Frank Nazar plays a game that could be effective in a bottom six role for the United States because of his two-way ability, because of how he uses his speed on the defensive side of things. I talked about how I think he could be a really good fit along with players like Matt Boldy and Dylan Larkin down in the Americans' bottom six, and his just better, well-rounded play, even though Connor Bedard has made strides defensively. He's feistier than ever. He's winning more faceoffs this year. Won 10 of 14 faceoffs last night in Seattle. He's making notable strides in all parts of his game, but he's still not a penalty killer like Frank Nazar is. He's still not known as necessarily being the strongest two-way player. That's more so fitting Nazar's skill set. So I think it does make sense for Nazar to be the one between these two to have a better chance of cracking an Olympics roster, even though it seems like a long shot for both of these guys. It's just because Nazar would fit better in the Americans' bottom six, where they kind of need that grit and grind mentality, when that's not necessarily what I think the Canadians would be expecting to get from Connor Bedard if they were to put him in the same situation. And I definitely also wanted to go through NHL.com recently dropping some projected rosters for both Canada and the United States recently, starting off with the United States in their forward group, which obviously is where Frank Nazar is trying to steal a roster spot. The NHL.com projects that Matt Boldy, Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, Jake Gensel, Jack Hughes, Clayton Keller, Dylan Larkin, Austin Matthews, JT Miller, Patrick Kane, Matthew Nyes, both Tkachuk brothers, and Tage Thompson are the 14 forwards on the roster currently, which honestly isn't all that far off from the prediction I gave for the Americans forward group back on August 20th. I also had Boldy, Connor, Eichel, Gensel, Hughes, Larkin, Matthews, Miller. I did have Patrick Kane because in what could be his final NHL campaign and probably his last chance to play for the Americans in the Olympics, I don't know how you keep a game breaker and a grizzled veteran like Patrick Kane off of the roster. NHL.com thinks the same way. I also had Matthew Nyes, Tage Thompson, both Tkachuk brothers, but I had Alex Tuch on this team just because of his size and his ability to kind of bang down low, which has been the American strengths over the Canadians. NHL.com had Clayton Keller in that last forward spot when I had Alexander Tuch. I think the big omission here that a lot of people have been pointing out is Cole Caulfield, who's off to an incredible start to his season. But do the Americans really need Cole Caulfield's goal-scoring abilities? That's just why, again, I think Frank Nazar, even though it's an outside chance, he can play down in the bottom six. I think that still kind of keeps him in the running if he's able to keep his play up over these next couple of months before the final rosters get announced. Still hard for me to say I expect it to happen for Frankie Nazar at this point in time, but I do think he'd be a really good fit. And I know he's on general manager Bill Guerin's radar, not only because he was invited to the camp over the summer, but also he's had a lot of standout performances against the Minnesota Wild and was excellent for Team USA at the World Championship last summer, where Bill Guerin was a part of the front office. Defensively for Team USA, NHL.com projects Brock Faber, Adam Fox, Noah Hannafin, Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Jake Sanderson, Jacob Slavin, and Zach Werenski. Back on August 20th, I projected basically the same blue line, except I had Seth Jones in there for Noah Hannafin, as I didn't really think Hannafin had all that good of a Four Nations face-off, and I do just feel like the Americans could use one more right-handed shot on that blue line to kind of even up the numbers 4-4. Then, in net for Team USA, NHL.com projects Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, and Jeremy Swayman to be the three netminders. And I do agree that's probably the way it goes. Obviously, Spencer Knight, we know he's off to a great start to his first full season with the Blackhawks. I think it's probably an outside chance for him to make this team a real outside chance for him, just like it is for Alex Vlasic. Even though Alex did get invited to the camp over the summer, I just think there's too many bodies ahead of him in the pecking order right now, but definitely could have a chance in a couple of years down the road. Spencer Knight wasn't even invited to the Americans camp over the summer, and Joey Decord was, and he's off to a really good start to his season, as we saw last night. So I don't think either Alex Vlasic or Spencer Knight are truly in consideration. Frank Nazar is definitely the best Blackhawks forward, with the best Blackhawks player to have a chance to be donning the red, white, and blue. And then for Team Canada, NHL.com gave a projection as well. They had Sam Bennett, Anthony Cirelli, Sidney Crosby, Brandon Hagel, Nathan McKinnon, Brad Marchand, Mitch Marner, Connor McDavid, Braden Point, Sam Reinhart, Mark Scheifele, Mark Stone, Nick Suzuki, and Tom Wilson as their 14 forwards. I would say the notable omissions here obviously are Connor Bedard from the Blackhawks and Macklin Celebrini of the San Jose Sharks. Back on August 19th, I projected that Macklin Celebrini was going to make this team. The two forwards that NHL.com had on there that I left off were Nick Suzuki and Mark Stone. Stoner's dealing with a little bit of an injury right now with Vegas, as he seems to always be doing. I don't know if they're able to take either Suzuki or Stone off of their roster, if they do have them right now. I don't believe Suzuki played for Canada at the Four Nations. I know for a fact Mark Stone did. But just with how well Macklin Celebrini has been playing so far in his sophomore NHL season, and like a Frankie Nazar, but obviously with a little bit of a bigger body, Celebrini is set up to have success in a checking role down in the bottom six for Team Canada. So I think they'd be really hard-pressed to not have Macklin Celebrini on this roster. But NHL.com projects he's getting left off right now, although I did see somewhere on the rumor mill yesterday that Macklin, someone said he's closer to a lock than he is a bubble player at this point in time. We'll see who that would mean gets left off from the Canadians forward group at the 2026 Winter Olympics. I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes to either parts of this roster since they won the Four Nations face-off and seem to have a pretty tight-knit group with one another. We'll see if Macklin Celebrini can wind up clawing his way onto that team. Connor Bedard, I think it's probably going to be an uphill battle for him, even if he continues to rack up points and make the improvements that he has so far this season. I don't know if it's going to be enough for the Canadians to feel confident about him in a checking role for them, probably down on their third or fourth line. Frank Nazar sounds like he has the best chance for any of the Blackhawks to play on the Americans. The Blackhawks don't have Lucas Reichel playing for Team Germany any longer, so we'll see if the Blackhawks can find a way to have some more representatives in the Olympics, but it's looking like it's going to be a little bit of a long shot at this point in time. I love Frank Nazar giving it a run for his money, though. We'll see what winds up transpiring over these next couple of weeks. But thank you, everyone, for making today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen, here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, up until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Go and check out NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL, available now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at JackBushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account is at Talkin' Hockey. Go and follow it so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.